do on. Okay, so so down here they're telling us information about the sine and the cosine, and they want us to figure out the quadrant. How do we do that? In fact, let me move this down so we have it a little more easily accessible. All right. There it is. Question number 1. Okay. Yeah, so they're telling us, what are they telling us exactly? Well, specifically, they're saying the sine is less than 0. That means that the sine is negative, doesn't it? You tracking with me? If the sine is less than 0, numbers or things that are less than 0 are negative. And what does it say about cosine? For part A anyway, cosine is also negative. So for part A, they're saying, hey, we're at some angle t. I don't know why they're not calling it theta, but that's what they usually do. Now they're calling it t, whatever. They could call it Mary if they want to. It's at just an angle. So some angle t, and the sine is negative, less than 0. And the cosine is also negative, less than 0. Which quadrant must we be in? That's the question. Well, let me help you with that. Here's your notes. So this is, again, the chapter 7 notes, which are at the top of the the chapter 7 module in your Canvas shell. So in the Canvas course shell, right at the top of the unit 7, or whatever it's called, the chapter 7 module, you'll find the chapter 7 notes. Okay, this is a memory device for how we remember which trig functions are positive in which quadrants. So for example, the memory device is all students take calculus. Something that's not true, but maybe should be true. All students take calculus. So it's all students take calculus. You can see it, ASTC. All students take calculus. It goes, and the quadrants go 1, 2, 3, 4. They go counterclockwise. Why? Well, because 0 degrees starts right here, and the angles go this way to 360, don't they? So that's how the quadrants go as well. Again, they made this all up. It goes backwards from a clock. They could have, the clocks that we all use start with midnight right at the top. That's the start of a new day. And the clock goes to the right instead of the left. Clockwise, we actually call it, right? For angles, for whatever reason, they made it up differently. They said, look, we're going to start 0 straight to the right, and we're going to go we're going to go counterclockwise for our angles. So that's how they did it. They went up for positive angles. So quadrant 1, 2, 3, 4, as you go up and around that way. And the trig functions, all 6, there's 6 different trig functions, right? All 6 trig functions are positive in the first quadrant. That's the A stands for all. All are positive. In quadrant 2, the only positive trig functions are sine, and of course his upside down always goes with him, right? So we have sine, and then his upside down is cosecant. Cosecant is 1 over sine. And then, so they go together. They're both positive in quadrant 2, which means the other 4, I'll write it here, the other 4 are negative. So in quadrant 2, only sine and cosecant are positive. See what it's saying right here? Which ones are positive? Sine and cosecant. Of course, sine and cosecant have to be the same sign because they're just upside down of each other. So if one of them is positive, the other one's positive, one's negative, the other's negative. They go together. So only they are positive in quadrant 2. The other 4 trig functions are negative. Tangent, cotangent, secant, and cosine. Those 4 are all negative in quadrant 2. Whereas in quadrant 1, all 6 trig functions are positive. And then we move on to quadrant 3. That's the t. All students take t. tangent, and of course, tangent and his upside down cotan, his reciprocal function. They're going to go together. And they're the only two that are positive. The other four are negative in quadrant 3. Which four? Sine and cosecant and cosine and secant. The other four are negative. Only tangent and cotangent are positive in quadrant 3. And then finally, we go to quadrant 4, where we have the only ones being positive are cosine and secant. Cosine and his upside down, his reciprocal function. Secant, only those two are positive. The other four are negative, which is sine and cosecant and tan and cotan. The other four are negative in quadrant 4. So that's an easy way to help you remember which trig functions are positive and by comparison negative in which quadrants. So it's a very easy memory device. All students take calculus. So just remember that. All are positive in the first quadrant. Only sine and his upside down are positive in the second. Only tangent and his upside down are positive in the third. Only cosine and his upside down are positive in the fourth. All students take calculus, the 4 quadrants, just like that. Okay, so using that information, we're going to use that a lot throughout the semester. So put that in your notes. Even better, put it in your memory. It'll be there once you've worked with it enough. You'll get it. You'll have it memorized without even meaning to. So here we go. They're back to part A. Now they're telling me, find out which quadrant you're in. Is it 1, 2, 3, or 4? And they're telling me the sine is negative and the cosine is also negative. Well, let me draw a little axis system and put the little, all are positive. Sine is positive. All students take calculus. So there's the little memory device. So, and this is, quadrant number 1, quadrant number 2, 3, and 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. So which quadrant, if sine is negative and cosine is also negative, can you tell which quadrant we're in? Could we be in quadrant 1? No way, right? If you're in quadrant 1, all 6 trig functions are positive. We're not there because sine is negative and cosine is negative. So we're not in quadrant 1. Could we be in quadrant 2? No way, right? Because sine is supposed to be positive in quadrant 2 and our sine is negative. Could we be in quadrant 4? No way, because cosine is supposed to be positive and our cosine is negative. So where are we? Quadrant 3. Gotta be, right? Because in quadrant 3, only tangent is positive and his upside down cotan. The other 4 trig functions are negative, which would include sine and cosine. So we must be in quadrant 3. I guess they want you to do it with like the Roman numeral way. Instead of writing a 3, they want you to just put 1, 1, 1, or no, it's I's. I guess those are I's. Yeah, I for quadrant 3, Roman numerals here. So yeah, we have to be in quadrant 3 on part A because sine and cosine are negative. Let's go on and try B. On B, they're telling me sine is negative. Again, oh no, not negative, positive, greater than 0. Greater than 0 is positive. So sine is positive and cosine is negative, less than 0, at least on mine, my B. So where is sine positive and cosine negative? Do you see it? It's not quadrant 1 again because they're all positive in quadrant 1 and our cosine's negative. It's quadrant 2, isn't it? Because there sine is positive, but the other trig functions are negative like cosine. It's got to be quadrant 2. Why couldn't it be quadrant 3? Well, because only tangent's positive, which means sine and cosine are both negative, and our sine is positive. So that can't be quadrant 3. Can't be quadrant 4. Cosine's positive there, and our cosine's negative. So it's quadrant 2. So you see how we can figure out which quadrant our angle is in based on the positive or negativeness, the sign of sine and cosine. Let's try another one. How about See, sine is greater than 0, so positive again. And cosine is also greater than 0. They're both positive. They're both positive. Where are sine and cosine both positive? Quadrant 1, huh? Because all the trig functions are positive in quadrant 1. You might say, well, what about quadrant 2? Sine's positive there. Yeah, but the others are negative there. So cosine would be negative. So we're not there. We're not here, quadrant 4, because cosine's positive, but the others, including sine, would be negative. That's not right. And it can't be here because only tangent's positive. And the third, sine and cosine be negative. So finally, last one, you can guess what it's going to be by process of elimination, I'm sure. Sine is less than 0, so sine is negative. Cosine is greater than 0, cosine is positive. Where's cosine positive? That's clearly quadrant 4. An I and a V. An I and a V for quadrant 4 because there cosine is positive, but other trig functions are negative like sine. So there's how we find the various quadrants based on the signs of sine and cosine.